Hello, welcome to my channel. This is What If Naruto Saves Karin from a Bear in the Forest of Death Part 6. If you like this video, thank you. You can subscribe if you want, but subscribing will be grateful to me. Well, I think it's for the video to start, and have a great day.
With a steady breath and a calm mind, Sakura breathed in slowly as she sat on her bed cross-legged after waking up. It was part of her morning practice that she had been taught by Kurenai. Her eyes were closed, her focus centered within the blank canvas of her imagination as she slowly began the process of molding yin chakra within her body. The art of illusion was one that was subtle, whether it was using one's creativity to dictate the perceptions of reality for a foe through internal techniques or weaving into the world that which dwelled within the mind. Sakura chose to practice her external technique for this morning's exercise, using her chakra as the paint and her room as the canvas. The yin chakra seeped out of her tenketsu and coated the room, becoming a film that covered the walls and forming a territory where the effect could take hold. Connected to her mind through the chakra, vivid imagery took shape before she locked it into place. Opening her eyes, Sakura found herself sitting within a forest as the sun rose over the treetops with the demonic illusion, false surroundings technique. Though it seemed perfect, careful inspection revealed there was a flaw in the illusion with the leaves and bark holding the same patterns. It was a mistake that could cost someone their life if seen through on the battlefield. That was unacceptable. Had she been overambitious to the extent that her mind overlooked something so simple? Or was she distracted by something else? Footfalls caught her ears before she could figure it out. Sakura dismissed the illusion, and her room came into view again as there was a knock on her door. "Yes?" "Breakfast is ready," her mother, Mizuki Haruno, said through the door. Sakura got dressed and went to the dining room. There she noticed her father's absence. "I thought Dad was due back last night?" Her mother shook her head. "No, it would seem that his mission has been extended due to some complications near the border to the Land of Sound. But he sent a message saying that he'll be fine and sends his love." She supposed it couldn't be helped as she sat at the table. While her mother had retired from being a kunoichi, her father was an active shinobi. Despite not being ranked higher than her, he was a senior shinobi with years of experience under his belt compared to her few months. "Are you visiting the hospital again?" her mother asked, making small talk. "Kakashi-sensei should be getting ready to be released, and I wanted to see him and Lee before I went to see if there were any D-rank missions available for me to take alone, since our team is dissolved for the time being. I should work on raising the number of missions under my record while I can." While she could try asking Sasuke if he wasn't doing anything at the moment, after yesterday she doubted that he would accompany her on something like that. Kurenai-sensei would also be recovering at the moment and not liable to teach her anything new, plus she had her own students to train. And Naruto was undergoing private training now that he was a chunin. "We should go shopping together sometime, just us girls," her mother said, looking at her clothes. "I think you could use a change of clothes since you're growing now, or maybe something to suit your shorter hair." It couldn't hurt. If anything, Sakura imagined that her mother felt lonely with her father gone, and it had been a while since they'd done anything together. "Sure. Of course, we still need to find another shop that sells our usual style of clothes as well." She held her hand to her chin. Jen had been such a wonderful tailor. It's a shame she didn't make it. Sakura stopped eating when she heard the name of the older woman. It brought up a feeling of guilt in the pit of her stomach. Her mother took notice. "Is something wrong?" Sakura shook her head and then forced down the rest of her food before heading out towards the hospital, after a quick stop to Ino's family flower shop to pick some up for her teachers. Since Kurenai's room was closer, Sakura decided to visit her first. Hinata, Kiba, and Shino were there already when she knocked on the door. "Sorry if I'm intruding," Sakura told her as entered the room when Hinata opened the door. "Not at all," Kurenai said, sitting up while her other students sat before her. "You're as welcomed as my other students. I just wish that it was in a more pleasant setting than a hospital room." I bought a get-well bouquet, but I should have expected you'd have received some already. To be exact, there were 2 other bouquets already on the stand next to her bed, one of which was roses. I'm rather fortunate to have so many people care enough to bring me flowers, Kiranai said, accepting them tenderly. Have you been keeping up your training since last we met? Yes, ma'am, Sakura said. Good. You have a lot of potential in that field. With the use of a few supplementary techniques, I feel that you'll almost certainly make Chunin during the next exams. Kiba chuckled a bit. Well, if Naruto could make Chunin, it should be a cinch for the rest of us next time around. That comment earned him a few stern looks, but it was Hinata that spoke up. He worked hard to earn his rank. You shouldn't say it like it was easy, Kiba-kun. Geez, I was kidding, Kiba said, rubbing the back of his neck at being chastised. Me and Naruto are cool. We even hashed things out over ramen last night to celebrate with the squirts he hangs out with. If you don't believe me, just go ask him a few doors down. Sakura blinked at that. Naruto's here? Yeah, Akamaru caught his and Sasuke's scent when we were on the way in. He tilted his to the right. They lead to your sensei's room. Sakura pardoned herself and then left out of the room to go see her team. The door to Kakashi's room opened abruptly before she reached it. Sasuke walked out and past her towards the exit without a word. Then Naruto came out of the room. Sasuke, you can't just... He noticed Sakura. Oh, Sakura-chan, you're here too? I came to visit Kakashi-sensei, she said, turning her head to Sasuke's back as he walked away. What's wrong with Sasuke? Naruto frowned. He came saying he wants Kakashi-sensei to teach him how to use his Sharingan better, and then left out when he agreed. He didn't even bother saying get well or anything. Hearing that, she was reminded of how he was during the early days of their team formation. You mean it's like he's going back to how he used to be? Just give him time, Kakashi said, standing at the doorway in a hospital shirt and pants. His mask and eye covering were on his face too, as per usual. He fixed his gaze on Sasuke. The encounter hit him rather hard on a personal level, and he's feeling anxious. Once he's had time to settle down, everything will be fine. Sakura wanted to take his word for it, but had her doubts to an extent. And are you okay, sensei? If anything, I'm feeling a bit too restless from all the sleep I've gotten. But once the final examination is done, I'll be free to go. He walked back inside, and they followed him into the room. Taking a seat on the edge of the bed, he looked them over as Sakura set the flowers down on the stand by the bed. First of all, let me congratulate you on your promotion to Chunin, Naruto, he said, taking in the sight of Naruto's flak jacket. You've come a long way from how you used to be. Yeah, I owe a lot of people for that, Naruto said humbly. Especially you guys. Now I've just got to live up to it, so I've been working hard to improve. I've even learned my elemental affinity and an awesome technique called the Rasengan. Kakashi seemed to perk up at that last one. You did? What is the Rasengan exactly? Sakura asked. It's a rank technique created by the fourth Hokage, done through shape manipulation and chakra control, Kakashi said. If Naruto really has learned it, he would be the fourth person in history to be able to use it. Watch, Naruto said before conjuring a clone. He then held his hand out as the clone made strange gesturing motions until a spiraling sphere of blue chakra took shape in the palm of the original's hands. See? Let me compare it, Kakashi said as he held his right hand out and then gripped his wrist with the left hand. A spiraling sphere of his own that matched Naruto's formed. No doubt about it, that's definitely the Rasengan. Naruto and his clone looked dumbfounded. In stereo they said, You can do it too. I did say you were the fourth. I was a student of the fourth Hokage and learned it when I was young, but the technique isn't very suitable for me because I couldn't complete it. Likewise, Jiraiya was the one who originally trained Minato-sensei and was taught it as well, so I assume it was him who taught you it. How long did it take you to learn it? Less than a week, he said as the clone disappeared. I can't get it down without the clone just yet." "It's beyond impressive that you managed to learn to form it that quickly," Kakashi told him. "It took the fourth Hokage around 3 years to create it. I took a few months to be able to craft it on my own, and I could never complete the technique fully." "It looks completed to me," Naruto said, looking pensively at it. "I mean that the technique is in its rawest form," Kakashi said as his technique dissipated. "It lacks a nature transformation. I tried to infuse my own element into it, but it proved too difficult for even me, and I created the Chidori instead to use in the war. You've come further than I could have imagined in such a short time, so maybe you'll be able to perfect it where we couldn't." Sakura couldn't help but feel somewhat surprised that he managed to learn what was supposed to be a rank technique over less than a week. It had to be between when he disappeared and then came back with that woman who helped Sasuke. And Sasuke had learned the Chidori as well over the course of the month they were apart. In comparison, she only learned a few techniques, and none of them were as powerful as theirs were. It seemed every time that they disappeared from her view, they were getting further ahead of her. Or what if she was holding them back in the end, and they could only flourish when she wasn't with them? "And you, Sakura, are similarly coming along nicely," Kakashi said, as though reading her mind. "You've gained practical experience in using both yin and yang chakra, not even a full year out of the academy. That's something few others can claim. You have a sharp mind and excellent control, meaning you'll be able to do many things with enough training. Be proud of that." "Thank you," she told him. Then there was a knock on the door. Shizune tried to repress the feeling welling up in her stomach as she knocked on the door of the last patient her lady had treated for psychological damage, having already cleared one yesterday and another minutes ago. But it was easier said than done. After all, the Hokage's words still weighed heavily on her mind. He wanted her to spearhead a course for medical training meant to serve as an introduction to those without experience so that they could perform simple treatments in an emergency situation, such as closing wounds that would either bleed out or hinder movement. Those that had exemplary skill in the practice could be placed later into an accelerated course, enough to gain their certification in a shorter time. While it pleased her to have his trust despite being gone for so long, she had her doubts about if she was qualified to do so when she had only just gotten back. Taunton, the small ninja pig that chose to go with her while their mistress was still at home, wiggled her snout at the door before turning to Shizune. "Buhai. There's someone we've met inside." She got a nod in response before the door opened, revealing Naruto and the girl she had seen the day that they had gotten back. "Hello, Naruto-kun." "Shizune ni?" His slightly surprised expression turned to one of realization. "Oh, you must be the one who's here to clear Kakashi-sensei to leave the hospital." She nodded as she entered into the room, Taunton following in her footsteps. "It shouldn't take too long. All I'm doing is making sure there are no lasting problems that need to be addressed." That said, both Naruto and the girl accompanying him sat out of the way as she hovered over the patient and began her work diligently. Though she doubted that there would be anything wrong, given that it was Tsunade who had dealt with the psychological damage, it was good practice to follow up afterwards. It also helped with maintaining her lady's anonymity. After 5 minutes of thoroughly examining him, Shizune gave him a clear bill of health. "You're all clear." "That's great," Naruto said with a bright smile. "Thanks, Shizune." Shizune shook her head. In the end, she was just checking on the flawless work done by her lady. There was nothing to thank her for. She excused herself while Naruto began to talk to his sensei about something else, making her way down the hallway, when the girl who was with Naruto came running after her. "Is there something wrong?" Shizune asked. "I'm sorry if I'm imposing on you, but I was wondering if there was another patient you could look at if you have the time," she asked. "He was injured some time ago and told that he might not be able to remain a shinobi, but I'm hoping that there might something the medics have missed that you might be able to catch." "I suppose I can take a look," Shizune said cautiously. It wasn't as though she couldn't take a few minutes to do so. "But if the other medics have given their assessment, I doubt I'll find something amiss." The pink-haired girl that introduced herself as Naruto's teammate, Sakura Haruno, led Shizune to the room of a young man with bowl-cut hair and thick eyebrows, where she ran a diagnostic on him and found the reason why they have given their assessment. "I'm sorry, but you have bone fragments lodged in your spine. They're not harmful to your daily living if you don't undergo strenuous activity, but it is certainly the type of injury that will leave you unable to continue as a shinobi." "So it's hopeless?" the young man asked in his wheelchair. "It would require a high-risk surgery to remove them. At best, I would give you less than a 50% chance of recovering if the surgeon is skilled enough. And taking an estimated guess, even someone with Tsunade's level of skill would raise the odds to a borderline 50% rate." Yet, despite such low odds, a flash of hope appeared on the boy's face. "You mean there's a chance that I could continue if I undergo the surgery?" "Technically, yes," she said. "But as I've said, the odds are rather low even in the hands of the most skilled surgeon. It would be an extensive surgery and require a long period of rehabilitation, not even taking into account your recent injuries, and that's only if it's successful. If it fails, you'll die. There's no middle ground in between." His eyes looked dejected for a moment, horrified even. That was natural, given that it was his life that was being wagered on what amounted to an elective surgery. There was no one who would blame him for retiring due to the nature of the injury, and he was young enough that he would be able to find a new career without trouble. Then his expression hardened. Remaining seated, he bowed his head towards her. "Miss, if you can find a surgeon capable, I want to undergo the surgery as soon as possible." Shizune was briefly surprised by the statement and finality in the tone of his words. There was no hesitation, despite what she said. "Are you sure that's what you want? If you die, then that's it. You'll be leaving behind everyone you know and care about." "I understand that." There was a hitch in his voice as he forced the words out. "I am terrified of the thought of dying. The thought of leaving behind my sensei, my team, my friends, and my family terrifies me. However, even more than that, I am terrified of the notion of turning down an opportunity such as this when I'd given up all hope until now." His voice wavered for a pause after admitting his weakness and hesitance and fear. "I had always dreamed of becoming a splendid shinobi to protect the village, despite everything I went through. Yet, when the attack happened, there was little I could do despite knowing that there were enemies attacking the people I cared about and vowed to protect. I was forced to accept that because I believed that there was nothing that could be done. I cannot express how painful that feeling was." Shizune's heart grew heavier as she listened to his earnest words. The sentiment was shared by Sakura, who held her hands close to her chest, and even Taunton, whose ears lowered as she stared at the teardrops that had pooled at the base of his feet. "If I were to turn down this opportunity because I was afraid of dying, then it would be even worse than death itself," he said, falling out of the wheelchair and to his knees, placing his head on the ground in a pose of supplication. "I would be dishonoring all those who chose to fight to their last breath, to my sensei that put his very soul into training me, and to myself for letting my fear control me. I would rather die doing all I can to protect them to the bitter end, rather than sit out and live with a knowledge that I didn't do everything I could to once more fight for the people I care about. I don't want to have such regrets, so please. Even if you say that, there's still the matter of finding a surgeon who would consent to the operation," Shizune said as she crouched down and laid a hand on his shoulder. "I'll consult with someone I believe to be capable, but I have to warn you that there's a chance they'll also decline." "That is all I can ask," the boy said, looking up. He was truly desperate, not just for himself, but for the sake of others. "If there is even a slight chance of success, I will take it without regret." Looking into the pleading pair of eyes, Shizune couldn't help but wonder if she had made things worse by offering him hope when there was possibly none to be found in the end. Jiraiya found himself frowning as he read the scroll in his grasp, a messenger toad waiting patiently at the foot of the boulder that he was sitting atop of. He was frowning even before he got the scroll, having been told by the old man he would be leaving for the hidden sand soon enough as his representative. The matter of their reparations and returning their captured shinobi had yet to be settled after all, and the old man was trying to put him in more political situations than he was comfortable with for when he was given the hat. However, this scroll was one of many sent from his various spies in the neighboring nations around the Land of Sound. After Orochimaru was finally slain and the majority of his forces utilized during the invasion executed, it had been something of a chaotic situation. The various clans and shinobi that had been under his thumb were no longer oppressed, and that meant they'd started fighting. The clans would wage wars, with losers being eliminated or assimilated beneath a single banner that consolidated power. The strays would turn to banditry to survive and eventually necessitate the use of shinobi to put them down. Tragedy would leave many miserable, something that he'd seen too many times to count. The Leaf was largely staying out of the matter because the Land of Wind was on the verge of the same thing, with their primary hidden village being significantly understaffed. The new Wind Daimyo had a vested interest in preventing that if he didn't want to end up like the old one. Yet, the scroll he had in his hands now outlined that the chaos in the Land of Sound was settling at an unnaturally fast pace. Jiraiya had been involved in a wide variety of conflicts, from wars between major villages to genocides between clans, so he knew the fallout from the invasion should have left them in disarray for a few more months as they vied to fill in the gap left by the disappearance of the hidden village. It was an ugly thing, but something that was repeated enough throughout history that it was nearly an absolute. Yet someone was suppressing the fighting, and Jiraiya had a sinking feeling that Orochimaru was involved. They had combed the base locations they got from Karin's mind and found them devoid of anything meaningful, hastily abandoned or destroyed to cover their tracks. He may have been dead, but Jiraiya couldn't shake the feeling that his right-hand man was still operating under his thumb and carrying out his plans. He penned a response on a smaller scroll that he pulled out his pouch. Then he handed it back to the messenger toad, which took it and then departed. That done, his thoughts turned to the more pressing matter of Naruto. If he had to depart soon, it may be more prudent to arrange for him to take a mission to gain more experience in working outside of his immediate peers. He'd have to see the old man about a mission that wasn't too difficult, something else to get his feet wet as a chunin. A few minutes later, Naruto showed up on time for his training and raised an interesting question. "Old sage, show me how to complete the Rasengan." He arched his brows in slight confusion. "You've got the basics down when you use a clone." Naruto clarified his request. "I mean adding an element into it, the nature transformation. Kakashi-sensei could do it, but mentioned that he couldn't add in his own lightning element, but since I've got wind and can use yang chakra, maybe one of them will work." "Ah, I suppose I shouldn't be surprised he knows it. It made sense that Minato's surviving student knew it. But you should probably focus on getting the technique down perfectly and your own element before trying that." Actually, now that he thought about it, maybe he should just tell Naruto about his father. He already knew about his mother, and he had come a long way from his early days. He could keep the secret, and the boy did have a right to know. "Naruto, do you want to know about your father now while we've got the time?" The boy's expression became conflicted, a contrast to what Jiraiya expected. He actually took a long moment to think about it before he spoke. "Can it wait until Karin is with us to listen? She was with me when I learned about my mother, and He was struggling to find the right word. It made sense given that one minute she was a member of his clan, the next she confessed she was in love with him. Kid didn't know how lucky he was on that front. "Fair enough," Jiraiya decided. "Though I don't think you'll have to wait long. According to the old man, that woman from the ceiling R&D building is trying to get you and her to come visit so she can get some answers about those other masks soon. We can talk about it then, but for now let's talk about what you can do with Yang Chakra, since you can mold it too and get some practice in." Karin groaned softly as she sat down at the desk in her room. Her muscles were throbbing with agony, pulsing with pain. Anko's idea of a workout was exhausting, though it possibly explained her figure, and she wouldn't even let her use chakra because she wanted her to save it for when she had to do exercises related to that. Regardless, Karin did her best to ignore the pain while going through the studying materials for the mandatory knowledge of the village. She had finished the section on the first Hokage and the founding of the village. There was a comprehensive look at the many clans involved in its formation, including the minor ones that had been assimilated or have gone extinct like the Uzumaki. Now she was on the second Hokage, who was responsible for creating many of the village's institutions and the support system that allowed it to function as well as it did. He was a creative and talented man for certain, being the creator of several techniques like the shadow clone, though there was no public mention of the variation Naruto knew, and possessed a unique sword of some kind that could forge a blade out of lightning that he combined with his water techniques to lay waste to his enemies. It was the attack on him by the Gold and Silver Brothers of the Hidden Cloud that was thought to be the catalyst for the First Great Shinobi War, which eventually killed him and left the current Hokage in charge for decades now. Despite all of that, Karin didn't have too much interest in the past outside of her clan. Even then, the information in the book she had here was less than that which she picked up from her independent research during the Chunin exams. If not for the need to do perfect on the test, she wouldn't bother going through with it. Time ticked away with her studies until there was a knock on her door. She looked at the clock to see that it was lunchtime. She closed the book and then left the bedroom for the dining room, where she found they were having takeout again. She ate it in silence and then thanked her for the meal. Enko, sitting at the table with her food, not even half finished, arched an eyebrow. "If you don't like the food, you can say something. I won't give you a mark just because you speak up about it." "I never said I didn't like it," Karin said. It was true she didn't find it as appealing as her usual cuisine, but it was tolerable. "I can tell by the way you eat." Enko leaned back in her chair. "Let me guess, the flavor doesn't suit your palate." Karin supposed that was why she was a specialist in tracking and interrogation and placed in charge of overseeing her. She took notice of these sorts of things. "I'm just not used to it. Grass was the last village I was in since I was a spy," Enko finished for her. "We've already accepted that. Go on." A soft sigh preceded her continuing on. "Since I was a spy, I had to stay low and keep to myself. No telling them about my healing abilities, no telling them about my sensory abilities, just do what I'm told by superiors and don't cause problems. I had to cook for myself since I lived on my own, and the selection of herbs and spices and meats they have for sale there are different than here. When I was visiting Naruto, I usually cooked in that style as well." "Okay then, if you're good, we'll go on a grocery shopping trip this weekend," she decided. "It'll be one of your privileges, and it'd probably be interesting to experience home cooking for once. All I know is survival cooking, and that usually involves catching, killing, skewering, and frying over a fire." Karin stared, puzzled by the show of lenience, before mentally shrugging it off and going to the bathroom to brush her teeth after the meal. There was still studying to do, and then chakra training after that. Though she still didn't get why she had to practice making chakra threads of all things. "You shouldn't have told him about the surgery," Tsunade told her apprentice in an exasperated tone as she finished reading the medical file on this Rock Lee child. Shizune had returned from her trip to the hospital, and they were in what served as the living room of their new abode within the village, with the slug Sanin perched on the sofa and Shizune sitting upright in a reclining chair. In truth, she hadn't been all that happy to begin with after that day's session. There were only so many times she could stand the memory of her lover's death being brought up to the surface as the root of her trauma before she lost her patience. More so considering that she wasn't allowed to drink right now, meaning that she couldn't numb herself to the pain. Then Jiraiya came in to check on her, and it took all her restraint not to throw him out of the window. Though no, she wasn't in a good mood when Shizune had come to her asking for her opinion on a medical procedure. Had it been anyone else, she wouldn't have bothered to even look at medical files or charts. But Shizune was the one person above all the rest in the village, next to the old man, who deserved her ear when she asked her for an assessment. She had been with Tsunade the entire time she was gone from the village and asked for little to nothing in exchange, so she got a pass. So, it's not possible to treat him after all? Shizune asked as she continued to gently pet the sleeping ninja pig in her lap. It's not impossible, but there's a reason the doctors waived telling him about the procedure. No one wants to have blood on their hands or record from this type of thing. Even if I was far enough into my own therapy to not be bothered by the sight of blood, I can't say whether or not I'd be comfortable handling the procedure. It'd be one thing if it was essential to save his life, but this was deemed an elective surgery, one with a morbidly high fatality rate even in the hands of a skilled surgeon. The surgeon in question will be laying their reputation on the line for no reason, risking their records as well. That could hamper their ability to be allowed to perform surgeries that someone else might need it. I see. Her dark eyes closed in defeat, and she sighed softly, her breath tinged with regret. Then I'll have to inform him that I was unable to find anyone capable. He and his friend will be crushed. It's a shame, but it can't be helped. Tsunade frowned slightly as she pointed out the obvious. Or you could do it yourself. Next to me, you're the most capable person to handle it. The fact that you could calculate the odds of success means you understand the risks and steps necessary for the extraction. If it's you, then the odds will be the best they could possibly be for the boy given the circumstances. Shizune's reaction wasn't that of surprise at the suggestion, merely reluctance and hesitation. She must have considered the option but refused to speak of it before now. That hesitation was concerning, given that a medic had to be decisive in their actions. Tsunade closed the file and set it down on the wooden table between them. Shizune, do you want to help this boy? Of course, she said almost immediately, in contrast to before. That was something she was firm on. She wanted to help him. And why is it that you want to help this boy, despite knowing of the nature of his injury and having no personal ties to him? I listened to what they told me about him and his struggles and how desperate he was to regain the chance to pursue his dream to help his village, she explained. Hearing that, and how he mentioned that he had hope for the first time in a long time, how could I not want to help him? Then why are you still hesitating? That was the key question here. You want to help him, so you have the motivation, and you have the knowledge needed to perform the procedure, so you're capable of doing so. Knowing that, what's stopping you from just doing it? Are you afraid that you'll end up like me if you fail? Shizune vehemently shook her head at that. That's not it. There's no one as great as you are in the medical arts. Even after all these years, there's no doubt in my mind about that. Then is it that you won't be able to meet the standard that you feel I've set? That garnered a reaction. It clicked. Shizune had placed Tsunade on a pedestal for what it meant to be a medic nin, even after seeing her at her worst. That spoke greatly of her faith and devotion, but it also spoke of the problem of doing so. When you look up at someone on a pedestal for too long, it looks too high to climb for you. Shizune, he's willing to wager his life on this because you gave him hope. He's accepting responsibility for his own decision regardless of how things go. That's how precious his dream is, and he's willing to die to achieve it. The rest is on your shoulders now. You have 3 options from my perspective, and each one of them has you being responsible in one way or another. Shizune straightened her back to listen. The first is that you can tell him that you simply can't do it and bear the weight of responsibility for crushing his dreams after giving him hope in exchange for him living as he is, Tsunade said. Don't lie to him about not being able to find someone else, because that's deflecting it and unbefitting for a medic nin. Accept responsibility since you gave him that hope, learn from it, and move on. The second is that you can try to find another surgeon to handle it. But no one will likely do that, Shizune said. It'll be near impossible, but there's still a chance, and it may take time, months or even years, and you'll be relying on the surgeon's skill rather than your own. Whether it succeeds or fails, they did make the decision and bear the majority of the responsibility. Not that you won't be accountable to some extent since they acted on your advice or counsel. Don't tell yourself otherwise. Shizune nodded in understanding before speaking the last option herself. And the last is that I do it myself? You take all the responsibility for what happens on the table as the surgeon. It's your skill, knowledge, and motivation that you're relying on. If you succeed, he'll be able to follow his dreams, and it's because of you. If he dies, then you have to accept that it happened and know that you did your very best. Of course, in a worst-case scenario, she may end up like Tsunade herself, haunted from her failure to save someone she desperately wanted to, despite everything. But Tsunade felt that Shizune, having seen her languish in that state for years, would be strong enough to come back from it. That in mind, Tsunade continued on in a soft tone. That is the burden of being a responsible medic nin that I've taught you. Every decision you make for a life is weighed against your knowledge, skill, and circumstances. There will be instances where you'll try your hardest and fail, but you have to accept that you did your best. Knowing all of that, which option would you take? Shizune brought her slender hand to her chin in deep thought, as though contemplating it. After a moment, she lowered her hand and spoke. Do you really think I can do it myself? Of course I do. If I didn't think you were capable, I would say as much. That was a necessity for a medic. They had to be honest about their own ability and be willing to take the weight of a life into their hands. Given enough time and practice, I'm sure you'll surpass me thoroughly. That was the role of an apprentice after all. That was why the old man trusted her with that program, and the bulk of the reason Tsunade agreed to come back here and go through all of this. Dan's niece, her apprentice, couldn't reach her full potential if Tsunade was weighing her down instead of propping her up. So she needed to pull herself together. That way she could guide Shizune even further. At least until the apprentice finally surpassed the master in the end. Sensei, you got that mission for Naruto? Jiraiya asked as he entered the Hokage's office. Yes, I have it here, Hiruzen Sarutobi said as he finished looking over the mission requirements for the scroll in his hand before rolling it back up and handing it off to his disciple. It should keep him occupied until you get back, and the two accompanying him are seasoned chunin as well. Not that I'm expecting trouble, but one can never be too careful. The mission itself was a simple one, a standard mission from the land of honey to help cull the numbers of honey badgers. The normally small creatures were known for their attitude and viciousness and resilience, but in the land of honey, the long-lived ones often grew to a much larger size than typical, with some of them being as large as bears. Between a hide resistant to blades, a fierce attitude, and limbs large enough to crush bone with a swing, these larger ones often necessitated being eliminated before they could plunder the hives or harm the local population. That being said, normally only a couple would come out from hiding every year. This year was an exception. There had been at least a dozen sightings and 10 casualties, not to mention the number of beehives that got cleaned out by them could damage their economy in the long term if not stopped. Thanks, Jiraiya said, slipping it into a pocket. Then he noticed the weary look on the elderly shinobi's face. What's wrong? Not sleeping? There was a minor skirmish with shinobi from stone by the border that was repelled, he said. I believe they were trying to see if it was possible to take advantage of recent events. All in all, it's nothing too major or unsurprising from Onoki, but I'm hoping he won't press this further. Jiraiya found himself frowning pensively at that. It wasn't unexpected, but with the issue of dealing with sand and the fallout of sound could spread their forces thin from a military perspective. Do you think that it'll cause problems later on? Onoki is no fool, Hiruzen said. As long as the leaf remains strong and the matter with sand is dealt with quickly, he will not push his luck. After all, a prolonged conflict will only serve to leave his own borders open to an assault given the past grievances the other villages have with his own. Their reputation among the major hidden villages was well earned for a reason after all. Virtually every alliance that they'd had turned sour as they backstabbed one village after another to the extent that should a war break out, they'd have enemies attacking them on every side. Then again, Cloud was no better things, and the only reason Mist was less of a factor was because they were across sea and had more ground to cover if they wanted to attempt something. And that was only covering the major villages, not the minor ones like with Sound had proven. It only served as another reminder that, despite this supposing to be a time of peace, every nation was just looking for an opening. Then again, was the Leaf better than them by a large margin? He'd done things that he wasn't proud of in the past. Things that wouldn't wash away no matter how much time passed. Just about every shinobi involved in warfare had, building grudges that would carry on a hero in one village was dreaded in the other. He hated it. Jiraiya hated that from the perspective of a hidden village, every other village was an enemy in the grand scheme of things. Even while things were considerably better than they were in the past, they were still far off from a world of peace. Still, he had hoped that, by the time he was as old as his sensei, they would make some more headway. Pushing that aside, Jiraiya turned his attention to a more cheerful topic. Then that just leaves the subject of the masks that are in the ceiling R&D's possession. Yes, I've already discussed that with the necessary parties, he grumbled. You have made Miss Tsuda a very happy woman, for the record. She's looking forward to learning of what capabilities the rest of the masks have, as well as their origins if possible. That woman was occasionally far more enthusiastic than even Jiraiya was comfortable with, but she was the most qualified for the task. It's a shame that none of Kushina's sealing ciphers or primers had survived the destruction of their home during the nine-tailed fox's rampage. She'd probably be a sealing master herself in due time, at least academically speaking. Practical use was a different story, and she seemed to prefer studying lost arts to recreate them rather than combat use. Then I'll go give this to Naruto and be on my way to Sand, Jiraiya said. That way we can sort this mess out once and for all. Hang tight until then. Be quick, Jiraiya. Leaving the office after bidding his mentor farewell, he made headway to Naruto's apartment and knocked on the door. When the boy answered, Jiraiya noticed Naruto looked a bit slack with his eyes slightly droopy, and he had a bandage on his head. Now why do you look so tired? You're normally all but bouncing around. I tried to do what we practiced with Yang Chakra and spent all night working on it. Naruto covered his mouth as he yawned. It's really tiring since it uses a lot of stamina and takes a bit of time to boost myself up to it. Plus, I kind of overshot and hit a tree because I wasn't used to the sudden shift. It's a lot different from when I used the fox. That's probably because you're relying on your own chakra and instincts while its chakra carries its influence and instincts. But if you get it down properly, it'll make you a lot faster and stronger without relying solely on the fox. He pulled out and handed over the mission scroll for him to take. Anyway, here's a mission from the old man. You leave out tomorrow for the land of honey. Awesome, Naruto said with a bright grin even before he opened the scroll. My second mission as a Chunin. I bet it's something like infiltrating a hideout or something like that. It's nothing like that. You've still got less than a year under your belt, and outside of wartime we leave that sort of thing to more experienced candidates. Jiraiya then proceeded to give the overview of the mission in question, rehashing the discussion that he had with the old man. So it's not all that hard, but it gives you a chance to explore outside the village and learn about different types of missions firsthand. It sounds simple enough, Naruto said, less enthusiastic than before as he looked over the details. Still, second mission as a Chunin. I should buy some souvenirs to bring back for everyone else. You can get some gourmet honey snacks there for a decent price if you know where to look, Jiraiya said sagely. In my travels, I've found that many women appreciate sweets, and their honey-soaked lemon slices, honey cake, and honey rice crackers were excellent gifts. Sakura-chan and Karin-chan might like those, I think. Not sure about the others, though. You got everything you need already? Jiraiya asked, getting back on topic. No need for spare kunai, sealing scrolls, things like that? It's important to be prepared even if the mission is simple.
Yeah, I got everything.
He rolled up the mission scroll and set it down before going over to where his flak jacket was and opening the pouches. See, I packed them into the scrolls ahead of time since I don't know when I'll be called into action. Jiraiya took a look at the scrolls in the jacket pockets. Because they were small, the scrolls in question were only able to store a few things in comparison to a larger scroll. Space and volume mattered when it came to the subject of storage, as well as the formula depending on what was to be the contents of the script. You wouldn't use the same formula to store water as you would your equipment. I'd suggest not having everything put away in a scroll, Jiraiya advised him after checking over his equipment. The time it takes for you get them out can be fatal, but other than that, you're good to go. Then he rose to his feet. He had to be on his way after all. Once I get back, we'll stop by the ceiling R&D and then go out to celebrate your mission success and talk about your father. Do a good job and listen to your seniors on the mission. You might learn something. Yeah, I know, Naruto said. See you when you get back. Sasuke arrived at home later that evening after training. His mind hurt more than his body, a mental fatigue that made his brain pulse within his skull. It was an unpleasant feeling in a different way than he was used to, and he took poorly to the fact that Kakashi's single eye had managed to get him to do something as outrageous as balancing a scroll on his nose like he was some kind of trained animal. True to his word, Kakashi had begun teaching him the use of his Sharingan to a greater degree, and he was starting with the use of the eye of hypnotism aspect that he utilized on Zabuza, working on the ability to inflict subtle suggestions that can influence an opponent, or outright control them if the user was skilled enough, as Kakashi had proven. The eyes acted as a lens in that case, but there was a subtle art to it that didn't come easily to Sasuke as the eye of insight aspect did. He would actually rather work on reading techniques and learning to mold his chakra to the appropriate affinity so that he could utilize it, expanding his arsenal to new heights. But Kakashi, the man known to have copied over 1,000 techniques, refused on the notion that ironing out the flaws in his suggestibility and shoring up his ability to handle genjutsu would be more important in the long run. Sasuke begrudgingly had to agree with him there, more so after he showed him the photo he took of the previous mentioned balancing act, which Sasuke promptly burned to ashes. Of course, no matter how hard his head was pounding, he immediately flung a kunai on reflex the moment that he sensed a presence that didn't belong in his home. The sharpened point disappeared with a meaty sound and then a wooden thunk, going through the body and pinning itself into the floorboards beneath it. He turned on the light afterwards to find that it was merely an albino snake, with the kunai having pierced it through the skull for an instant kill. At least, he thought it was an instant kill before the flesh began to bulge, and then slink from the rear towards the wound made by the kunai, where a smaller snake broke through it and then slithered out. It was decidedly creepy, even by his standards. He readied another kunai just for the revulsion factor. Only the sound of a familiar voice stopped him from throwing it. I would appreciate it if you didn't slay my relay serpents, Sasuke-kun. They are quite difficult to produce. You're Kabuto, aren't you? He asked, to which the serpent bobbed its head. Sasuke couldn't help but scowl. What are you doing in my home? My apologies. However, I wished to discreetly contact you, and it was the most efficient method that I could use. The serpent's beady red eyes looked him up and down before fixing its gaze on where his seal was located. I have come to collect you so that we can advance the cursed seal that Lord Orochimaru gifted you. There was a mild pulsing sensation from the cursed seal upon hearing that, held in place by the sealing script around it like a ring of thorns turned inwards. Sasuke brought his hand up to it before giving his answer. I refuse. Somehow, the serpent managed to display what amounted to a surprised expression before composing itself and asking a simple question. Are you giving up on the power of the cursed seal? I have no intention of doing that. After all, he needed every advantage he could get if he was taking out Itachi in the future. The cursed seal's power was a secondary source of chakra, a booster that could heighten his physical strength, stamina, reflexes, and more. The battle against Gaara proved that much. However, two things stopped him from accepting his offer. The first was, as mentioned before, he needed to learn to use his eyes properly. The only one who can teach me to use a Sharingan is someone who has one, and that's Kakashi. No matter what power I gain from the cursed seal, it won't replace being able to properly learn how to use the Sharingan from someone who has it. So until I've learned everything that he's capable of teaching me, I won't budge on that. The second thing was that he didn't trust Kabuto as far as he could throw him. Not for a second. The man had managed to deceive them at the Chunin exams, and the fact that he'd done so easily enough to sucker all of Team 7 made him wary of whatever the spy had planned for him. And then there's the fact that one who gave me this mark is dead, Sasuke added. He tried to take out the Hokage and failed, so what good will learning from you have in the end? The snake stared at him in a pensive silence after that declaration. Then it rose up slightly. I see. So you place the value of strength on being able to surpass one's enemies, and there is no meaning in learning from one weaker than another in your presence, is that right? Yeah, that's right. The snake began to chuckle. Then by that standard, there is no one greater than Lord Orochimaru, and no one more suitable to teach you what you desire than him. For you see, Sasuke-kun, Lord Orochimaru has surpassed an enemy greater than the Hokage, or the village, or even your brother. He has surpassed death itself, thus he is by all accounts the strongest individual in this world. Sasuke found himself contemplating his words and what the weight of them. Kabuto actually sounded like he believed that to be possible, but dead was dead. He'd seen enough of his clansmen fall that fateful night to know that much. You're insane if you actually believe that. The snake shook its head. He may have lost this skirmish with the Hokage due to the toad's Sannin appearing, but he is immortal and can merely attempt again after learning from his mistakes, so what of value was lost? I shall prove it to you in due time, Sasuke-kun. Sasuke took a step back as the snake suddenly set itself ablaze. The emerald flame was unnatural, bursting from the scales to slowly devour itself and the serpent corpse that it emerged from. The final parting words that it uttered left a chill running down even his spine. The next one to contact you will be Lord Orochimaru himself. Take in as much knowledge and training that you can and become a pupil worthy of Lord Orochimaru's tutelage by then, because once things begin there will be no turning back. The snake vanished entirely after that. It didn't even leave ashes behind, making Sasuke question just what was the point in doing that if they were so hard to make in the first place. That guy made no sense. He stared at the spot a moment longer before activating his Sharingan to ensure there was no other chakra signatures within his household before he rubbed the sealed cursed mark on his neck that settled down. I must admit that hadn't gone as well as planned, Kabuto noted as the medium he used to speak and see through the serpent went inert. He was in a base that was in a secure location far from prying eyes and unknown to all but a few aside from the test subjects squared away. He had to chide himself for the momentary lack of composure after the plan went off rails, but he supposed it couldn't be helped in the end. The original plan had been to have Sasuke sign a contract with the snakes and then use that to reverse summon him out of the leaf without anyone being able to track him down. From there he would use him to revive Orochimaru from his seal and then use him as a vessel. It would have been the perfect recovery in the end, denying the leaf one of its assets and ensuring the Sharingan for his master. He'd have the perfect body, the perfect eyes, and with the land of sound being brought to heel, it would have been as though nothing had happened. However, Sasuke's wariness put a delay in that plan. Oh, it was a minor setback in the grand scheme of things as long as he desired power and would eventually come around. In fact, it might be better in the end if his body was allowed to mature and his chakra reserves to fill out as well. Still, that left the matter of reviving him through Plan B, with the other candidate in leaf that would serve for that purpose. Considering that Anko was currently watching Karin, it would be two birds with one stone, reclaiming both the young women that had abandoned his service and putting them to use. The only real question was merely how to lure them both out of the village at a suitable time and location. Tapping his fingers on the desk for a moment as he formulated a plan while going over some of Orochimaru's other projects that could be of use, a smirk came across his face. It would do just fine. Let's get the greatest prison break in the Hidden Leaf's history started. The Konoha Strict Correction Facility was used to house criminals of the Leaf that committed treasonous acts or murders, the worst among the worst that didn't warrant a sentence to Hazuki Castle or execution. During the current time of peace, the number of criminals was minimal, and so the facility was downsized and placed within a volcano. There, the prisoners' chakra was devoted solely to keeping the heat from overwhelming them as they tilled the soil futilely. Of course, in the wake of the invasion, the smaller size meant that the addition of the sand captives led to a serious overpopulation problem. The cells that could fit 2 to 4 prisoners easily were now cramped, housing 5 to 8 each, with former Leaf prisoners being placed in one set and captives in the others to prevent any unnecessary casualties among the two. Needless to say, none of them were happy. So you have a single facility filled with trained killers that lost their leader, lost their war, and were stuffed into overcrowded prison cells nestled within a volcano. How much havoc could they cause in a short time if they all got loose and scattered about, taking their revenge against the land of fire as a whole? How much manpower would it take to bring them all to heel? That was the question that came to the minds of the Anbu and Medical Corps shinobi midday as they looked over the battlefield that the correctional facility devolved into sometime during the night, when their guard was at its the lowest due to the majority of the prisoners being asleep and behind bars. They'd only received notice something was wrong when the shinobi that came to change their shift arrived to find corpses strewn about. Some were impaled by golden arrows and kunai, others were withered husks. The watchtower was filled with bodies that had been crushed by blunt force, and some looked like they had numerous bite marks from razor-sharp fangs. The equipment used to contact the village itself was sabotaged upon inspection, so even if they had tried to, they couldn't have alerted the village before the change in shifts. They dispatched a team to send word to the Hawkage personally, unable to trust that a message would make it without being intercepted any other way. The rest combed the prison for any survivors to explain what happened and who was responsible for this. There were none to be found. In the village proper, Enko found herself staring down at the golden chain of chakra in her charge's hands with a raised brow. It wasn't very thick and was roughly the width of a finger, with each link being smaller than that. And it just came out when you tried to do the chakra string exercise. The girl at least looked as confused as Anko did as the length of the chain increased. I followed the instructions, focusing on sending my chakra out as densely as I can and to maintain it a straight, condensed form. It hurt the first time, since my tenketsu aren't used to trying to force chakra that dense out, but it turns out like this every other time. You're really just full of surprises. She grabbed the length of chain between both her hands and pulled it a few times to test how durable it is. Well, it's fairly tangible, but I wonder how it stands up against someone with chakra. Tightening her grasp, Anko channeled chakra into her hands to strengthen them, and felt nothing. Her hands were numb compared to rest of her body until she released the chains. Only then could she feel it flowing back into her hands. It interfered with my ability to use chakra just from touching it. Karin grabbed the chain and started fiddling around with it in curiosity upon hearing that, wrapping it around her wrist. I don't feel anything different. Then again, it wouldn't make much sense for something made from my own chakra to suppress itself. Maybe it only works on foreign chakra then. Anko's thoughts were racing on the implications of this and what sort of other effects it could have. Would the effect increase with the size of the chains? Would it work on different types of chakra? And more importantly, did the Hawkage know about it, given that it was part of his guidelines that she underwent training in using chakra strings? I think I should go tell the Hawkage about this. It seems like something he'd want to know, HM. She trailed off as there was a knock on their home door. Opening it revealed an Anbu officer with a scroll in hand. She took the scroll and looked it over as the deliverer vanished, and her expression turned to a frown. "Gear up. We leave out in 5 minutes." The sudden change in her tone caused the younger Kunoichi to look up from the chain that she had formed into a seamless loop by connecting the ends, causing the chakra composing it to meld together. "Is something wrong?" There was a massive prison breakout, so they're calling in every shinobi that's capable of tracking and sensing, and assigning them to different sectors that they've divided the land of fire into before the inmates can cause problems that reflect on the village or try something stupid. She looked up from the scroll towards Karin with a stern glance. You remember what I told you about being out on assignments, right? I do, Karin said, letting the chain dissipate. But if I haven't encountered their chakra before then, I won't recognize whether or not I should be looking for them. All I can do is point out if they have chakra or not. That's fine. Any questioning or fighting will be done by the Anbu accompanying us, while I'll be watching your back to make sure nothing happens to you if it does come down to a fight. We're going to be moving around a lot since you've got decent range on your sensing ability, so you need to focus on not missing anything if you can help it, got it? Yes, ma'am. Sorry about this, Naruto said with his hands clasped together as though to offer a prayer to the honey badger roughly 3 times his size that laid before him in a lifeless heap. He couldn't say he was fond of the vicious bear-sized creature, but he still didn't exactly enjoy having to kill it. But that was the mission he and a pair of other Chunin, Heiase and Okai, had taken. While they had arrived earlier that morning in the land of honey, the trip had been something of an awkward affair since his partners were roughly twice his age. But they were pretty straightforward with explaining how they operated on this sort of mission, having done it a number of times before. They marked a map he had of the local area with spots that the big ones usually nested in and decided that they would split up to cover all of them as quickly as possible once night fell. One more to go, Naruto said with a sigh as he finished enclosing the corpse in a sealing scroll that Okai had given him. The Chunin was apparently familiar with a variety of sealing formulas, as proven when Naruto asked him a question about it. He immediately regretted it when he ended up having to listen to an hour-long speech about the difference in the formulas and how they affected the containment, preservation, ejection velocity, etc. On the plus side, now he knew how to make a simplified single-item storage formula that could fit on a sheet of paper the size of a business card. He used them to keep his masks sealed in separate sheets with their names on each one in his pouch. That made carrying them around much easier since he didn't have to rummage around in his storage scroll for them. Setting out to the next spot marked on the map, searching for any trails that would lead him to the last target, Naruto came to a stop when he heard a strange sound cutting through the air from behind him. He turned around and squinted his eyes, only to register what it was only a second later. Whoa! He jumped upwards as an oversized shuriken whizzed by where he had stood and wedged itself into a tree. It was an unmistakable attack against him. Landing in a crouch, Naruto turned in the direction that it came from as he reached for his kunai pouch. Who's there? Take a guess, a familiar voice whispered from behind him. It can't be. He turned around to see the stretching limb and spread fingers flying forward from the ground, but too late to react as it struck. The fingers of the stretching hand closed around his neck and carried him several meters across from his landing spot into the trunk of a tree. The impact wrenched the kunai from his hand, and a pained cry suffocated in his throat as his consciousness flickered upon hitting the back of his head against the tree. GRKK. I can't tell you how long I've wanted to do this. A figure emerged from the ground seamlessly. I've had dreams about squeezing the life out you, 9-tailed brat. Naruto's quickening pulse skyrocketed as he laid eyes on the man who had betrayed his trust, revealed the secret hidden from him, hurt Iruka, and tried to kill him. He was far more muscular and broader than Naruto remembered, stripes lining the muscular frame at certain points and eyes narrowed into slits. But it was him, no doubt. A snarl bubbled up in his throat as the name forced itself out through his gritted his teeth. Mizuki. Glad you remember me, he said, tightening his grasp to cut off Naruto's windpipe. The boy frantically tried to wedge his fingers between his neck and the broad fingers slowly strangling him to death. Because I haven't forgotten how you ruined my life. You ruined it yourself. Naruto gathered chakra into his hand and fingers, bleeding it through the tenketsu, and then repeated the training steps he used to cut through leaves to sharpen the chakra. The rushed and desperate act resulted in cutting into both his fingers and the set around his throat. The flexible hand retreated, blood running from the gouges from where the sharpened wind chakra parted Mizuki's flesh. "So they taught you some new tricks, huh? How did you get out of prison?" Naruto panted, working to level out his breathing as he picked up the kunai and held in a defensive position. The dull throb in the back of his head, the hot blood that ran from his hands where he'd cut himself in haste, the bruised flesh around his neck, all the pain he was in slowly fell to the back of his mind as he stared at the man in front of him. "And what did they feed you in there?" Like my new look, he tightened his fist to flex the muscles in his arms. "This body is the result of the power bestowed upon me by the knowledge of Lord Orochimaru." "The snake guy is dead," Naruto said. "The old man made sure of that. Believe that if you want, it doesn't matter. What does matter is that when I was sprung from prison, one of his men gave me what I needed to attain this power in exchange for doing them a little favor first. So you and I are going on a little trip. After I've worked out my frustration, of course." It wasn't hard to guess who it was that gave Mizuki whatever power he was going on about and wanted Naruto brought alive. There was only one person alive that would do both while flying under Orochimaru's banner. The moment that Naruto came to that conclusion, the air grew tense. A feeling of anger blossomed in his chest, and the cuts on his fingers sizzled softly as they healed over in a prelude to what was to come. "That bastard Kabuto is behind this, isn't he?" A slight chuckle left Mizuki's lips at seeing the anger becoming tangible in his visage. Confident in his own newfound power, he didn't fear it. "I wish Iruka could see that look on your face right now. Even he couldn't confuse it for anything less than that of a monster." "Tell me where he is," Naruto ordered, feeling the same anger that beckoned his tailed beast cloak in his voice, which no doubt reflected on his face. He hadn't forgotten how Kabuto had been the one to activate that seal that ended up causing Karin pain. Nor did he forget how she'd nearly blown herself up to try and take him out. Just remembering it was enough to get his blood boiling, and it was only the memory of the sort of monster he became and nearly killing Sakura that stopped him from reaching out for that power to tear the location out of Mizuki's flapping lips that instant. Mizuki extended his hand, palm facing up as though offering it. "Don't worry, I intend to take you there personally. But first, I want to test out my power against that of the demon fox." The two glared at one another with clear hostility that mounted with the looming silence as one attempted to restrain himself and the other urged the change while drunk on his newfound power. Only the distant crashing sound reverberating through the trees broke the tension. The rational part of Naruto latched onto it and recalled that was where the other two Chunin had gone off to finish their mission, likely to be victims of a rampage should he lose control. "I brought two friends of mine along with me," Mizuki said, following his side glance. "That sound you hear is them tearing your comrades apart. They had poor luck taking a mission with you." "Then I don't have time to waste playing with you," Naruto said as he made the cross seal. Shadow clones popped into existence and surrounded him. Two of them broke from the group to follow the distant sound of destruction and search for his teammates. The rest swarmed Mizuki like a tidal wave. The sight only served to put a smirk on Mizuki's face that bared his fangs. Then he exploded into motion, fast enough that Naruto barely registered as the memories of the clones in front of him popped half a second before the man was in front of him with his fist cocked back. The world blurred as one of the clones pulled a substitution and took his place. That was close, Naruto thought as his mind caught up with the swap. He was faster than Naruto had predicted, and if the clones didn't have some ability to make their own judgment, it would have gone poorly. The rest of the clones tried to swarm him again, only for Mizuki to bat them aside until he spotted the sole one standing still and moved as quickly as before, likely pegging him as the original. Naruto's instincts screamed for him to use a substitution the moment he lost sight of him. It proved to be the right call as he received the memories of the deceased clone afterwards. "It's only a matter of time before he catches me. I'm going to need to deal with his speed and finish this quick." Naruto went over his options in the span of a second as he swapped places again. Getting Byakko out of the ceiling slip and mask would take 3 seconds at the least. That sort of time wasn't an option while Mizuki could close the distance at the obvious tell. Not to mention if he was in touch with Kabuto, he'd likely been informed about Byakko and has a countermeasure ready. So that leaves something he can't know about. Naruto had already exposed he could use wind chakra, so that was out. That left the Rasengan and the thing he was working on before he left the village. The former could likely end the fight in a single blow, but Mizuki was fast enough that Naruto was struggling to keep track of him. The latter could probably surpass Mizuki in terms of speed, but it took time to convert enough yang chakra for it to manifest properly and last for more than a minute. As long as I can stop him from moving, they both should be able to work though, Naruto decided as another set of clones disappeared between a swap. An idea came to mind, though he wasn't a fan of it. As long as it works, it'll be worth a hit or two. He created 10 more clones, giving the appearance that he was trying to pad out his losses. Each of them was instilled with the plan as they pulled from his thoughts on creation. One dispersed immediately, spreading that knowledge to the surviving clones which acted it out. Naruto threw himself forward and swapped places with a clone, leaving it to scatter along with 5 others. Mizuki took note of their departure and made to give chase after them, suspecting that he was one of them. Naruto used that opportunity to fling explosive tagged kunai at the 6 in a spread shot, since he didn't know which one Mizuki would go after. At the same time, he felt a pair of clones raiding his pouch from behind for the concussive tags he had there. 6 explosions rang out, stopping short of the clones as they used the foresight to escape the blast radius with a well-timed burst of chakra from their legs. Mizuki, with his clothing scorched from the proximity of the blast, but otherwise unharmed, immediately wheeled around to try and strike down the one that threw it. A substitution put Naruto out of range as one of the tagged clones took his place and was dispersed by the blow, resulting in a chain detonation as Naruto used a body flicker at the last moment to get clear. The shockwaves from the explosions threw up a dirt and dust veil. Memories of the clones that were sacrificed flooded Naruto's mind as what remained of their chakra spread to the rest. The surprised look on Mizuki's face at the last moment left him wanting to believe that it was over, and that his extra measures were unnecessary. That belief was summarily crushed as Mizuki abruptly shot of the ground like he was breaking the surface of water. The man was slightly injured and furious, that much was clear as he lashed out with the back of his fist. It connected with Naruto's head and pain bloomed where the blow had caught him before he hit the uneven ground with a loud thud. A haggard breath left Naruto's mouth as his sight returned just in time for him to see Mizuki's foot descended to stomp on his chest. Even with chakra flooding his body in reflex to the impending blow, the force still jostled through his body as it passed through. The ground caved in around him as he let loose a pained cry padded out with blood. Og! The sound etched a cruel smile onto Mizuki's face. He was reveling in the superiority of the moment, intent on drawing it out as he pressed down. The Leafs' standards must have really fallen since I got locked up if someone like you made Chunin because of a few cheap tricks. That you fell for, Naruto said with a wheeze as a set of memories suddenly flooded his mind. One of the 6 that he had dispatched earlier was watching the scene unfold and dispersed to signal the counterattack. He used his hands to brace Mizuki's leg and then anchored himself to the ground with chakra to hold him in place as clones broke through the surrounding brush from the 4 cardinal directions. The biggest issue was that Mizuki was too fast to properly hit. But he wasn't like Neji, whose eyes let him peer through a trap, or had that spinning defense that took him by surprise. A textbook ambush would work just fine once he could no longer evade by sinking into the earth or jumping away, which was accomplished by baiting Mizuki at the expense of taking a hit even if it was sooner than planned. Being attacked by all 4 directions with only 2 hands and 1 leg free, Mizuki could possibly fend off 3 of the 4 attacking him now. The 4th would hit no matter what. Between all of them carrying kunai laced with wind chakra, each and every one of them could cut him down. You think this is enough to take me down? Mizuki, angered at the thought of being outmaneuvered, lashed out while caught between the four-pronged attack. He brought his other foot up, placing all his weight onto the original's chest to catch the one attacking him from the front. His left hand turned into a fist that he brought down with all the might he could manage to smash in the head of the one attacking the left. Reaching for his oversized shuriken that fit just right in his other hand, he swung it to cut the third one down. That left his rear exposed to the last one. The clone was positioned perfectly to drive it into his unprotected back. At least that was what should have happened. Instead, there was a loud popping sound as Mizuki's right arm turned boneless from all the joints dislocating. The limp arm still holding the large shuriken stretched around like a living serpent, guided by his chakra. It promptly cleaved the clone's head in half, causing it to disperse along with the technique. Certain of his victory, Mizuki grinned down at the younger shinobi and his lips moved to gloat, only to be promptly thrown off so abruptly that he was in the air and spinning before he realized it. Righting himself and landing in a crouch, his confusion only served to grow in the face of the boy rising to his feet while wreathed in a thin yellow aura like sunlight given form that bled from his skin. The timing was too close, Naruto thought as he looked down at his hands and body in disappointment. The death of the fourth clone served as the trigger for the fifth, which had devoted itself to converting all the chakra it possessed into yang chakra as quickly as it could to dispel itself as a next-to-last resort. The net result was supposed to be a sudden influx that flooded his limbs with vigor, threaded his muscles with strength, sharpened his senses and reflexes, and numbed the pain as his body healed at a heightened rate, but Mizuki catching him with that kick too soon and fending off the fourth clone like that cut it short. That must be the power of the nine-tailed fox, right? Mizuki asked, regaining his composure after being surprised. He mentioned you could do something like that, but I was expecting more. Naruto shook his head. True enough, it was based off his time spent while wreathed in the nine-tailed fox's power while trying to kill Kabuto. That strength and speed were when he was at his strongest to date, but that sea of anger and murderous desire robbed him of reason. So he took Jiraiya's advice and the training that he'd went through with Karin and Sakura to form a means of reaching a similar state without the corrupted and malevolent influence. His own chakra reserves could be used to attain a similar form. He'd practiced and ended up running into a tree as a result to confirm it. But in this case, it was both rushed and divided by a third due to the existing clones seeking his teammates. So he couldn't even form a chakra arm or make another clone because it would spread the yang chakra too thin to reach a heightened state. But it's good enough like this against him, Naruto concluded as he stared up at Mizuki and clenched his fists. You should be grateful that I'm in this state instead of using the fox's power like I planned as my last resort. Oh, and wise that he lunged for Naruto with abnormal speed at the final word to try and catch him off guard. Yet his charge was met with a cross-counter as Naruto's fist greeted his face eagerly. Mizuki was then sent crashing through a tree a few meters behind as a result. Because I would have torn you limb from limb already, Naruto finished. And if I do that, I can't get answers from you. So let's wrap this up, and you tell me where exactly Kabuto wanted you to bring me, okay?
That will be all for part 6. Thank you for watching, and have a great day to you all.